Hi friends, my name's Trish Roberts, you're watching Faint Signals from Vega. So I just wanted to do a very short video about Bernie Sanders. As you probably know, he has announced that he is running in the 2020 US presidential election, and I'm not here to celebrate that any more than I would any other candidate. But I just wanted to say, as William Bloom has said, that just say that Bernie Sanders was anti-interventionist and anti-war and was anti the drone program. William Bloom says that if he became president and he was all those things, that and as he a few days into the presidency, if he was rolling back the military interventions, etc., that on the 5th day he'd be assassinated. That's what William Bloom, the historian, felt about the national security state, the deep state is another name for it, in the United States, and the military-industrial complex, the surveillance state, the tech companies, everything, the whole shebang. All these corporations, they have a stake in whoever becomes the President of the United States. Bernie Sanders, he's okay with the drone program, as I said, and he equivocates on Palestine, goes back and forth on Palestinian rights, and he also, he called Maduro a dictator, I think, on Twitter recently, and which is just nonsense, and he also promotes anti-Russian propaganda. I think he also called Chavez a dictator as well, and he said that the latest Venezuelan elections were, not transparent. Well, that's a lie too. The anti-Russian propaganda is very dangerous and could lead, and is leading, to possibly a nuclear Armageddon. So it's no small potatoes when people promote that kind of thing. Anyway, that's just my thoughts on Bernie Sanders and his foreign policy, and a lot of progressives don't seem to mind those things, and they'll say things like nobody's perfect. When you're talking about the destruction of countries and the millions of lives being destroyed, that's a terrible excuse, saying nobody's perfect. Anyway, but he says he's going to roll back he says he's going to stop the interventions and stuff. I don't know how he's going to do that. And and as the historian William Bloom said, if he himself, William Bloom, who recently died last year, late last year, if he became president, he said he would roll back all the wars and all of that, and then on the 5th day he'd be assassinated. And that's really where it's at, I think, now. With U.S. presidents. I think if any president, no matter who they were, Tulsi Gabbard, she's also okay with the drone program, and there's other problems with her, which I won't go into. But if any of these people actually got through the primary, that's another thing I'm going to talk about, but if they got through the primary, they would, and they were actually anti-interventionist, anti-war, and also, for free Medicare for all and all of that, they'd probably be, in some way, they wouldn't get to even get through the primary, and they wouldn't become president of the United States, because there's too many corporations who have a stake in who becomes the president. Too much is riding on corporations profiting, so, there's all the weapons industry and the military-industrial complex, all the big pharma, who is the biggest lobbyist in U.S. Congress by far. There's also AIPAC, the Israel lobby. They have a stake in who is president, and that president has to be pro-Israel. They have to be okay with the apartheid situation in Israel and the killing of Palestinians and all of that. They have to be fine with that. So, Kamala Harris crosses all the T's and dots the I's in all that regard, and she is the one that the DNC, the all the rich donors and all of that in the Democratic Party, the party of the rich people, the party of war, which is the Democratic Party. Kamala Harris is the one they've picked. So that leads me to the question of the primaries, which is where the candidate is picked for to become the Democratic nominee for the President of the United States. Last time, in 2016, Bernie Sanders was robbed of that primary, and the DNC even admitted it when they were sued. They said, we have the right, the DNC said, we have the right to choose whom we want as our presidential nominee. And they feel quite entitled, they said in this lawsuit, to sit in the back rooms with cigars and decide who is going to be their Democratic nominee. And they don't have to pay any attention to the voters. And that is where I have to ask people who support Bernie Sanders, and I understand, before I say this, I understand why people support him in that he had changed the narrative, which was really important. I had no idea how in the dark a lot of US citizens were about the fact that that healthcare is a right, that they are entitled to free education and all that kind of thing. They're entitled to a lot of things, right? I had no idea that a lot of US citizens did not know that, because I would have imagined that they would have just looked at a lot of the other Western countries to see that most of them, Canada, Australia, where I live, we all have a relatively free healthcare. And it's just sort of something that Western countries have. So it was kind of a shock to me to find out that this is not something that a lot of US citizens knew they were entitled to. So it turns out Bernie Sanders helped change the narrative there and help wake people up to what they deserve, and also he's been talking very clearly about not overthrowing governments, even though he talked out of both sides of his mouth when he talked about Venezuela, like Maduro was a dictator and it wasn't a transparent election and all that kind of thing, and that's absolutely untrue. And also, he drums up anti-Russian propaganda. He's done at least 3 videos about it. But anyway, that sort of doesn't seem to upset a lot of progressives. They're happy to put aside and not be concerned about foreign policy and the effects of US empire invading one country after another, or attempting to overthrow governments left and right, which it's been doing particularly since 1946. So, I think it's 81, and I've shared that meme with you a few times now, and I will again. So, this is the state of the affairs in the US, and where I was getting to is, what are Bernie Sanders supporters going to do? And I ask this sincerely: what are you going to do if Senator Sanders once again allows the DNC to rig the election, which they're going to do, because they're not going to let somebody interfere with their corporate welfare and the rich people, the oligarchs and everything, and the wars, the imperialist wars. They're not going to allow anybody to interfere with that, right? The Democratic Party. But what are you going to do when they rig the primary against him, and he does not, once again, he does not call out the DNC and challenge them and insist that he become the nominee if he won the thing, if he obviously won? Like he did last time, he just refused to call them out. What are you going to do then? And I sort of feel like, because this hasn't been resolved, because like Senator Sanders has refused to go on the Jimmy Dore show, even though the Jimmy Dore show has a very large following now, 2 million plus. You know, he's been on other things, and this is sort of alternative media. And he won't go on that show, and I think it's because the Jimmy Dore will ask difficult questions, and he's not prepared to address them. You know, there's a few questions I could ask him if I was still able to live stream, if I actually had a tower in this area that wasn't doing 2 megabytes per second the download speeds, and I couldn't interview him. He wouldn't be interested in me. I'm small potatoes. But I'm talking about, but you know, like Jimmy Dore show, which has 2 million plus subscribers and great following. You know, I know that Jimmy Dore would ask some difficult questions. I would hope, anyway. So anyway, that's what I want to ask. You know, like Bernie Sanders followers, the ones that are going to support him. How are you going to feel when the DNC does something to make sure that he is not the Democratic nominee? Because they've selected Kamala Harris. There's no doubt about that, right? What are you going to do when that happens? And what are you going to do if Bernie Sanders once again just submits to this corruption and the rigging and refuses to call out the DNC? How are you going to feel, and what are you going to do? And this is the last time he'll be running. And I understand why people are so desperate there. I do. Because it is a terrible state that country is in, internally, and what they're doing overseas. It's in a dire mess. I mean, we're not great here either, and we've got a really right-wing government here at the moment, the Scott Morrison coalition government. It's awful. But the other party, the Labor Party, is so centrist and also so racist when it comes to asylum seekers and keeping them in detention and not treating them when they're sick and all this kind of thing. It's just appalling. I'm appalled at both major parties. At least we have a preferential system, a ranked choice vote system, as you would call it in the US. So we do have other parties we can vote for. So there isn't this stranglehold, right? But still, it's a sad state of affairs, particularly when it comes to war. Even the other parties don't call out the US and their overthrowing of governments and their all that kind of thing. And they won't call out Israel really either, as far as I know. Maybe the Greens might, I don't know. I don't think so, though. I think they're all they just keep quiet when it comes to anything like that. But anyway, I'm going off the track. So Bernie Sanders, you know, although he changed the narrative, and that was really, really important, and this run that he'll do, he will continue to reinforce that narrative. Even CNN notices that Bernie Sanders has made things that were almost unthinkable 5 years ago, like free health care, Medicare for all, has put it into the sort of the dialogue, and now it's kind of become normalized. And that's where he becomes a truly great threat to the Democratic Party, the party of rich people, the party of war. So if it's true that, and the Black Agenda report says something to the effect of the Democratic Party and all the oligarchs who are supporting it, the rich oligarchs, all the corporations and the military-industrial complex, everything that's riding on who becomes president and being able to continue on their merry way, securing everything for the 1% and leaving everybody else high and dry and in desperation. The party that causes such austerity for people, which is completely unnecessary if you understand MMT, the operational reality of a sovereign economy. It's completely unnecessary that things are the way they are. The sovereign government is a currency issuer and can afford free health care, to fix infrastructure, to eliminate debt, free public education and so forth. They can do all those things because it's a sovereign economy. It cannot go broke unless It cannot go broke. The only constraints are resources. So look up MMT, learn MMT, that's modern monetary theory. It's not a theory, it's not something that needs to be implemented, it's just the current operational reality of a sovereign economy. And that's what the US is, that's what Canada is, that's what Australia is, and that's what the UK is, etc. So, you know, the government can afford all those things, it just chooses not to. And it's not an either or, it's not like that money that is got for the military is then put towards, you know, is stopped and then put towards something else. It's not like it's an either or. They could afford to do the whole military thing, even though that's really bad, and do free Medicare for all. So anyway, look that up, that's important. And that's what Ocasio-Cortez understands. She understands MMT. And Bernie Sanders' economic advisor of 2016 was Dr. Stephanie Kelton, the same person who's advising Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So Bernie Sanders understands MMT, and that's why when Hillary Clinton was going, oh, you can't give everybody a pony and all that kind of thing in her book, What Happened. I think that's what it was called. Or what went wrong, I think. You know, actually, as long as you have the resources, yes, you can. And I hate that thing, pony, because I'm vegan. I don't believe in animal exploitation, but that's the thing that she said, Hillary Clinton. Yes, actually, you can afford to do all those things, free healthcare and everything, because the government is monetarily sovereign. And Bernie Sanders understands that, because his economic advisor in 2016 was Dr. Stephanie Kelton. So if you're supporting Bernie Sanders, please look up Dr. Stephanie Kelton. It's important, because if or when Bernie Sanders is sabotaged once again, and if he doesn't call out the DNC, the Democratic Party, etc., you at least need to know that the government is, that you at least need to know something about the economy, so you can hold politicians' feet to the fire when they say we can't afford it, or when something comes up that's about people rather than the war, they say, well, how are you going to pay for it? Notice they never say that when it comes to questions about war and funding war. That's because they know they are monetarily sovereign and they can afford those things, right? So anyway, that's important that you know what that means, even if Sanders doesn't win, which he probably won't. I'm sorry to say that. I'm not trying to be a downer. I'm not trying to be... I just don't believe in, I don't believe in candidates. I believe in grassroots movements, non-violent grassroots movements. I think we're going to need, like the yellow vests. We're going to need a yellow vest movement actually to change anything, because I really think at this point things are so far gone in lots of countries now that we're going to actually need a yellow vest movement. And so, you know, that's what we need. I don't think any candidate, no matter how they might be, no matter if they were the most perfect candidate and were anti-war, anti-imperialists, and they understood MMT, and they you know, they were for all the good things, right? They would never get anywhere near the presidency of the United States anyway. And if they did, they'd probably be assassinated, just like William Bloom said. So, you know, it's time for us to, I hate to say this, but I think it'll be a miracle if he gets through that Democratic primary. And if he does, I think they will, in the Black Agenda report even sort of hinted at this, that they might be so desperate that they tried to knock him off. If he actually got through to the primary and he became the Democratic nominee, which is highly unlikely, they may do what they can to try and knock him off in some way, or sabotage him so severely that he has to drop out. That's how far gone it is. And I believe that too, just by the sort of the craziness of the US empire now. I mean, Bolton is actually talking about getting rid of Ortega in Nicaragua now. You know, it's Venezuela, it's Syria, it's Iran, it's Nicaragua. I mean, it's just absolutely appalling and an abomination. But that's where they are now. They are so far gone that they are constantly warmongering, constantly wanting to overthrow governments. And as William Bloom, the historian, said, it's because they want full spectrum dominance. They want literally want world domination. That's what he said, and you can see that. It's very clear by their actions. That's what they want. So anyway, I think what I'm trying to say is you need to, if you're going to support somebody like Bernie Sanders, you're going to need to hold his feet to the fire when or if he doesn't challenge the DNC when the DNC sabotage him or rig the primary once again so that he doesn't win and that Kamala wins instead, Kamala Harris. You need to really have a plan. But I would even, you even need to challenge him right now and say, Senator Sanders, what are you going to do when the DNC sabotages you again and rigs the primary? What are you going to do? Make him make a commitment to you, to supporters. Now, I think he's going to be problematic. He's for the drone program, all of that, I've mentioned all of that. But I'm just saying to you, though, at the very least, you need to hold his feet to the fire right now, before you go giving your $27, right? Before you go putting all your hopes into this person. You need to, en masse, ask him what he is going to do when the DNC does that to him. Now, he may decide to run as an independent. He may have that on the cards, I don't know. Or he may just acquiesce, which the Black Agenda report seemed to think that he'll just let it go, and bow down to the Democratic Party. And I don't know why he would, since this is his last run, and maybe he wants to be one of these senators that keeps serving until he dies, and so he knows that if he doesn't please the Democratic Party, they'll put in some candidate in his area and get rid of him. Who knows? But really have to, Bernie Sanders supporters really have to seriously do this right now before committing to him. Make him make a commitment that he won't drop out, that he won't acquiesce to the corruption of the DNC, and he won't allow them to sabotage him and get away with it. You have to get that commitment from him. Why put in hundreds of millions of dollars to this man if he's going to do that at the end? I mean, talk about, that fool me once and fool me twice thing. I mean, seriously, do you want to have that disappointment again? So anyway, that's all I really wanted to say here was, I don't believe that any candidate is the answer at all, and I think he is problematic on many levels, Palestine and a whole thing, right? I think it's very good that he changed the narrative, and that's priceless, really. But I mean, this whole nobody's perfect thing, that's a terrible excuse. That is a terrible excuse, because people's lives are at stake. This is a very powerful position, the President of the United States, and they destroy countries and kill millions of people. So saying nobody's perfect when it comes to having a problematic foreign policy where it's okay to use drones, and most people that are killed by drones are civilians. They're not quote-unquote terrorists. And who even knows who those people are? Droning people from the sky and bombing whole towns in Iraq and all that kind of thing. This is it's appalling, it's war crimes. And so when people say, oh, nobody's perfect, they're saying nobody's perfect, it's okay, occasional war crimes is okay? Please. That is just so sort of a racist, white supremacist, imperialist thing, to be okay with that. So we have to, please, we have to snap out of that. It is not okay, never. That is a deal breaker, and it should be a deal breaker for anybody who calls themselves a progressive, right? So, anyway, that's really all I wanted to say. There was probably some other things, but that party, the Democratic Party, is so far gone. And I don't even know where the Greens are. I mean, they don't seem to understand the operational reality of a sovereign economy. They don't seem to want to. And they're completely off the radar. Maybe somebody's seen something from Jill Stein, but, you know, I don't know. It's terrible. It's terrible to watch, and we're all going to suffer for it. In many ways, they really should have a global election for a US president, because they meddle in so many countries and do so much destruction. You know, we should all have a say in it. I mean, the CIA admitted helping overthrow my own government in 1975. We've all paid for it. Australia's still a neoliberal mess since that time. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Please click the like button if you like the content. Please subscribe and click the notifications bell if you wish to receive updates. And please leave comments. I always appreciate comments, particularly if they're civil. So I'll see you next time. My name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Viga. Till next time. Bye for now.